This is Truth Be Told.
That not only are there reptilians here,
new evidence of UFO fleets.
We were close to nuclear war.
To help you transform so that you can live your highest truth.
We're not being told just because we're not ready for it.
Geostations of frequency, vibrational.
I was a homicide detective with LAPD.
UFOs increase. Visitations. One of the hottest and most controversial Netflix series out right now is about Jeffrey Dahmer. And today we're going to go inside the mind of Jeffrey Dahmer. We have on the show today author, criminologist Christopher Berry-Dee in his book, Inside the Mind of Jeffrey Dahmer, The Cannibal Killer. We're going to find out what Christopher found out, his many years of research about serial killers, and what made Jeffrey Dahmer's mind tick. Christopher is the international bestseller, UK and the world's #1 true crime author. This is the way to open up the Halloween season, the most sadistic and psychopathic killer of all time, Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, author, criminologist, Christopher Berry-Dee. Hello, Christopher.
And a very good evening from England.
Right, well, right. You over here, I just had my lunch, so you're getting ready to go to bed. Well, you know, first of all, I'm curious. You being in the UK, you know, I think every country and every century has had their notorious serial killers. And I'm curious how you started the research of all these books. You have tons of books about serial killers. What was your fascination with it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was an intelligence officer in the Royal Marines. I was a Green Beret Commando.
Wow.
And I interviewed terrorists in the Far East and in Northern Ireland. And then when I left the Corps, I wanted to, you know, just see why people killed for fun, really, not for political reasons. And I started writing to serial killers. This is going way, way back now, you know, when you had to send a letter or whatever. And I started writing to people like Kenneth Bianchi, Harvey the Hammer Carrick, and Henry Lee Lucas, Aileen Wuornos, a whole load of them. And bit by bit, I got together quite a lot of information from them. And then I went out there and interviewed about 30. I corresponded with 30 and interviewed them. Michael Ross on death row, you know, Douglas Clark, the Sunset Slayer, and then some women, and then Dahmer came up. Now, I've got to tell you, I didn't interview Dahmer because television budgets are what they are.
Right.
You know, and my producer said, well, look, we've got Kathy Maywood and Gwendolyn Graham out of Grand Rapids, a killing couple who suffocated 5 old people in a nursing home.
Wow.
And Gwen Graham was up at Michigan Way, and I was going to interview Jeffrey. Got all the permissions, but my producer said, "Look, let's do the double act with the 2 girls, and we'll forget Jeffrey."
I mean, now do you wish you had had the opportunity to sit down and talk with him?
No, he's dumb as fuck. I didn't really like him at all. I mean, he hasn't got much to say. He's like Henry Lee Lucas in a way. When you interview Henry Lee Lucas, this is going way back.
Right.
You know, there are serial killers that can converse and talk to you and threaten you and animated or whatever. But Henry was dumb. And also, I would suspect that Jeffrey Dahmer talking to him, monosyllabic sort of talk, no. You know, I've seen the interview with his father and a few other interviews. He doesn't have much to say, really.
He definitely was an introvert that, I mean, you said you didn't watch the Netflix show, but I did see it. And I found it, especially the first episode, really put chills into my body, which not too many movies and series have done that to me. And I think it was just because it was so horrific thinking about being in the minds of those people being murdered and drugged and even
Well,
eaten.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll watch it after this podcast thing, this talk.
And please let me know what you think. Please let me know what you think. So when writing about serial killers, especially with Jeffrey Dahmer, where do you start? Where did you start with putting this book together?
Well, the thing was, I mean, I don't get asked to write a specific book. I decide what I want to write, and
which is good.
I mean, I'm doing 2 books at the moment called Letters from Serial Killers. It's completely unique. Letters from hundreds of serial killers, well, dozens of serial killers. Reading between the lines is sort of more of a sort of in-depth study into their psychopathologies. But with Jeffrey, he caught my eye. But I noticed that there were so many books written about him. And I thought, well, there's something missing here. I've read these books. They're all good books. They're brilliant. But there was something missing. And I wanted to find out what made him tick from day one. And to be honest with you, he was a very lonely boy. Let's get this straight. He had a very, very troubled childhood. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. Right. There was some abuse in the family. The family were always mother and father arguing, fighting. And you've got to imagine your viewers yourself. If you've got a little boy and the house is in turmoil and the little lad wants to get out of it and he wants to escape and he goes into the woods with his dog and he starts to develop these fantasies, another world, living in another bubble world. And I actually found that part of Jeffrey Dahmer's life fascinating and sad. Yeah. Now, this is not to mitigate his crimes at all, but I imagine my son, if he was in that situation or I was in that situation where I couldn't talk to my mum at all. My dad was a strict disciplinarian. Where do you go as a little child, a little boy, where you're developing your brain? And I found that part of his life quite sad. Same as I did with Aileen Wuornos. You know, I read the book Monster that went with the film starring Charlize Theron. Right. And I found her childhood extremely distressing.
You know, that was a question I have, is because I know I grew up, even though I grew up in Kansas, my dad was an alcoholic. My mom was very ill, so she was gone a lot in the hospital, so I was alone a lot. And I did have to go into my own little world, but I never went to fantasizing about mutilating animals, you know, eventually wanting to kill people or even eat people. What do you think studying serial killers takes them to that next step? Because I went through a hard childhood too, but I didn't get to that point of wanting to take revenge on killing people.
Right. Well, let's get one thing absolutely straight. He never hurt an animal. They were all roadkills.
Yes, that's true.
And the thing is, he never taught. A lot of serial killers torture animals. Arthur Shawcross did. Monster of the Rivers, I interviewed him before he died. A lot of these serial killers, have a history of abusing and hurting animals. They get a lot of sadistic pleasure. Jeffrey had none of that. He actually loved them. He was curious how they worked. Now, that in itself is not too unhealthy. Right. It's that jump between loving an animal, a living thing, but then eating somebody. Oh, my God. That's a big step just even killing somebody is one thing, but actually eating somebody is different. He got into drink. We all know he was in the army for a short time. Right. And he fucked that up. He was drinking heavily at school. In his very early teens, 11 or 12 years old, he was half cut at school. And he started to withdraw completely. He was a little bit lonely at school. And again, it's almost like he wanted some friends. And then, of course, he killed the hitchhiker, his first kill. Right. And he said he woke up and he hit him with a dumbbell or something. And then whether they were drunk or whatever happened, we're not there. But you wake up after a heavy drinking session and you see a dead person on the floor with a dumbbell sticking out of their head. Right. And you think, what am I going to do with him? Right. Yeah, that would be. I know what I'll do. Before my mum and dad come home, I'll dismember him and I'll put him in a bag and stuff him under the crawl space. And when that didn't work, he cut a long story short, he scattered all the bones all around the neighbour's property. But that was his first kill. And then they obviously cooled down after that because he thought, my God, I'm going to get caught. And this is where, like all serial killers developing, they're very frightened the first time round, and then they calm down, and then all of a sudden he found that he enjoyed it. He enjoyed the company. But it's that big leap. It's a tremendous leap from a lad at school then in the army, and it was a disruptive time for him, to becoming a ghoul, like a zombie. And having to eat other people to live.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to ask this question. I don't want to go too off topic because I want to get back to Jeffrey Dahmer. But why do you think people, like even yourself, why do you think people are so fascinated with serial killers? I could sit and watch, these unsolved mysteries and documentaries and TV series constantly about serial killers. And you're like, is there something wrong with me that I enjoy it so much to watch it? Why are we so fascinated?
Well, look, you don't get many programs about the Pope, do you?
That's true. I mean, unless we find out he's a serial killer, but
I think we like to be secretly scared. We watch all these things. There's a certain amount of voyeurism, gruesome voyeurism attached to it.
Right.
But it's all very nice watching on TV. And all right, it might be terrible if some serial killer runs amok in my country, but that's not round my corner. It's not in my town. It's somewhere else. So we get lots of press headlines and stuff like that. But when it comes really close to you, and it's like in your face, then it comes a bit different ball game. And I want your viewers and that to think, what would it have been like if you'd have been a fly on the wall in Dahmer's flat?
Oh my God!
And think about this for a minute. You're watching in this dim light with his fish tank bubbling away. He's gaunt. He's thin, his hair's unwashed, he doesn't smell nice. And there he's sitting on the floor, drilling a hole in some boy's head and then dissecting him and videoing it while it's all going on. Imagine if you will see that in real, and then, or that little boy that was escaped and got dragged back there. Can you imagine the terror?
That's, I think, what put chills on my body when I watched the series on Netflix. It was just the terror in my mind of thinking, putting me in that position. What would I do? How would I try to escape? Because we can always say, oh, I would just, beat him, kick him in the balls or punch him in the face and get out and unfortunately these people were mostly drugged where they couldn't even defend themselves.
Well, the thing is with Jeff, like all these serial killers, they have a preferred victim type. Bundy had his preferred victim type.
Yes, he did.
Shawcross was prostitutes, most of them prostitutes. Kenneth Bianchi was hookers and young girls. They have a preferred victimology. And Jeffrey knew, he was cunning enough to know that he would approach gay men who were lonely or seeking companionship, and he would buy them a drink and ply them a drink and say, well, look, come back to my place and party. And by then the person's already relaxed and is happy, and he goes back to Jeff's place. And then that's when it starts. He gets his drink spiked and it's over and done with him. He's dead. He's a dead man walking the minute he walks into that flat.
Yeah, no, and the last gentleman, I think, I can't remember his name, that survived and finally brought the police back to the place to end this, crazy serial killings. His suspicions before he started drinking the drink kept him from being drugged and where he could keep a sound mind. So Somebody actually was asking earlier, because normally we do this live, and I ask people in the chat room to give some questions. Somebody asked, what was the main reason Dahmer was able to get away with these crimes for so long? Why do you think a lot of these serial killers get away? Well, back in the day, I can understand, because we didn't do DNA testing because we didn't have it. But why do you think serial killers get away with some of these crimes for so long? Like Jeffrey's was 17, 18 people. Some of them, like Casey, was like up to almost 50 or more.
Yeah. I did stuff with John Gacy. I went to the Des Plaines. I interviewed for a few minutes on death row, John.
Oh, wow.
They're actually like chameleons. They present to the outside world a sort of a normal person. Jeffrey appeared as a non-person, a non-threatening person. Why would you suspect him? He doesn't look like a serial killer. People have got these stereotype views of what a serial killer looks like. I mean, if you want to see what a real serial killer looks like, look at Dougie Clark, the Sunset Slayer I interviewed in San Quentin on death row. He ranted, raving and spitting and foul language and shackled up. He's a funny guy, Dougie. He's got quite a sense of humour, but we don't. If somebody, I give these lectures, and the first thing I say is, you've got 200 or 300 people in a room in a hall, and I say, well, look, just look around you for a minute, and look at somebody sitting behind you, or across there. Can you see a serial killer amongst you? And they all say, well, no, obviously not. So, well, that's exactly what they are. They're living amongst us, and you don't see them. So why would anybody suspect him initially? Jeffrey was a non-person.
That's what I noticed about Jeffrey versus Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy. Jeffrey seemed to be more of an introvert, where he kind of, like you said, got hidden in the background, where Ted Bundy and Gacy was kind of like this, good looking and charismatic, and like I think Gacy was part of political system, and all these things where he was so much out front, but they end up doing the same things of killing. So have they done mental or brain function differences for serial killers versus, I guess, the normal brain function? Is there any difference that you know of?
Well, look, let's start off with this one very quickly. That all serial killers are cowards and they're lowlifes. It doesn't matter whether it's Bundy, Gacy, Harvey the Hammer Karen, who's built like an ape. Massive hands. I interviewed him at Stillwater MCF. Threatening, massive guy. Looks like a Neanderthal man. But they're cowards. You see, Harvey would never hit a man. Ted Bundy would never hit a man or get into a fight with a man because he'd get his pretty teeth knocked down his throat.
Right.
These are cowards. Let's get that straight. I mean, even Ronnie DeFeo, the Amityville Horror, I interviewed at Stormville when he was alive. He shot his family, a family of 6 to death in their beds with a Marlin rifle. And that takes a lot of guts to do that when they're asleep, doesn't it? Right. But we make these people up to be like, well, in Bundy's case, icons or something like that. But they're gutless and they're cowards. And exactly the same with Jeffrey. He was a coward. He wouldn't hit a grown man. He wouldn't even slap a woman. He had to have somebody that was drugged to hurt and eat. And to me, that is just the lowest form of human life.
And why do most of these serial killers, like you said, they are cowards and they go for the weaker? Because it's kind of like, and I hate to even bring this up, but like the Oscars when Will Smith goes up and slaps, Chris Rock. I mean, my thing is, if like somebody said if it was The Rock, Will Smith wouldn't have went up and smacked him. So, I mean, you definitely always try to attack the ones that are weaker than you. And But they always end up having a huge ego. Even I didn't even know this, but in the Netflix series, you could tell me if it was right or wrong, but Jeffrey started getting kind of cocky in prison because people were sending him money, wanting autographs, even tried to sell somebody one of his old glasses, saying this is going to be worth something one of these days, give me some money or something like that. So they start getting this ego because of their celebrity from being a serial killer. Is that common?
No, it's absolutely you're 100% correct. What you've got to remember is that once they're locked up in prison, like all of these serial killers, they just become a number.
Right.
And they're just another inmate, so-and-so and so-and-so. And they're nothing. They're nothing amongst their fellow cons. They're just another killer. But what they do is they feed off to get some notoriety. Their egos are sort of massaged slightly. I've got, Michael Ross, who I interviewed on death row, he's executed now. He had an IQ of 150. Oh, wow. He was a Cornell graduate. He was bookish. He was quite good looking. He killed 7 girls strangled them to death. He was an insurance salesman. And the thing was, he had hundreds and hundreds of girls writing to him. And it was a picture of me on my website, of me looking through his cell. And he's saying, oh, look at this, Chris. Look, letters everywhere. Keith Hunter Jesperson, the Happy Face Killer. He sent me hundreds and hundreds of letters from girls. One of them was a lipstick mark on it. And I wrote back to him and said, what's that lipstick kiss doing on that letter? He said, oh, no, Chris, he said, that's not lipstick, that's menstrual blood.
Oh my God!
Wow. That's the weakness about getting to interview and interrogate these people. You play to their ego. I use mind control techniques. In other words, if a killer says, "Oh, I had a red Ferrari," I'll say, "Oh dear, I could only afford a red XJS," and then say, for instance, I actually sent him a photograph, which I did have one years ago. Oh, do you like blondes? Yeah, blonde victims, they're really nice. So, I'd love to have a blonde one day. So you mind control them and you reel them in. But with Jeffrey, I didn't get a chance to do that because there's nothing in his head.
Another question we got from when I asked earlier, since I knew we weren't going to be live, they said, based on your conversation with serial killers and psychopaths, does any interaction you've ever had stand out to you above the rest?
That's a good question, isn't it? Just I think the most evil person I've ever met is an English woman called Joan Dennehy, who killed 3 men in a week, and then she went on to try to kill 2 other men. Oh my God. About 34 years old. She was truly, I went to interview her, and she leant across the table in the prison and she looked him in the eyes and said, killing you would be good for me. Oh. I mean, if you went to bed with her at night, you wouldn't wake up in the morning alive. So I think another Kenneth Bianchi definitely smelt of evil. But again, he's a coward. I mean, I was sitting in a small cubicle with him and he was unshackled. And I pissed him off a bit before I'd even got in the prison over some matter. And I was alone with him and he was staring his eyeball at me, his black eyes of a shark. And I got up and walked around the table and I put my arm on his shoulder. I said, look, Kenny, you're a miserable piece of work. I said, give me a smile. I'll come all the way from England to see you. And his brain stopped working because I'd walked around the table and touched him. And he gave me an hour's interview. And then as soon as the guards unlocked the door and he walked out, he turned around and he snarled, don't ever come near me, I'll rip your head off. Well, I did. I went to his cell and I wound him up outside his cell. And then I saw him on exercise yard in the snow. And he just pulled his hat down and walked past me. And everywhere I went after that, funny enough, what I did, everywhere I went where he killed somebody or I sent him a postcard and said, "Wish you were here."
That's no poking the bear. Well, you were a Green Beret. I think you probably could have handled yourself pretty good. So, I think a lot of people think mostly when you say serial killers are men, and we hear of very few women, but a lot of the same traits in the men mental state and cowards and stuff. What about women? Because we don't hear about them often, but like you said, most women were killing men, which is now you're kind of going for a stronger, typically stronger species above you. So what's the difference between the women serial killers and men?
Well, most women killers kill for insurance purposes. In other words, they poison their husbands, so there's no conflict between the two. It's not physical. So you get black widows. So they're and there's quite a few of them I've spoken to over the time, but they kill for double indemnity insurance policies. That's the first thing. So we can get that. I mean, it's a couple of English women. One woman, she poisoned her husband with antifreeze, and at the funeral, one of the girls said, "Oh, what about the sandwiches that are left over?" She said, "Oh, save that for the next wedding." but to get to the point of that, the Kathy Maywood and Gwendolyn Graham, who I mentioned at the start of the program, they killed for a lesbian love pack.
Oh, okay.
To bring them closer. Now, that was them. They were serial killers. But when you've got somebody like Lee Wernos, now I make a big thing about this. People call her a psychopath. She wasn't a psychopath at all. She had a terrible childhood, absolutely shocking. She went on what the Americans, you guys call the lam. And she was young, she feisty, she pretty, she got herself into some scrapes with the police. And she ended up down in Florida and she met a gay girl called Taria Moore. And Lee would do anything for that young girl. But Taria was actually present at one of the kills. I know that for a fact. But put it this way, Lee took the rap for everything. I just think that there was actually no need to execute her at all. That was an absolute shame.
I don't know if you saw the Netflix series again. You can tell I watch Netflix a lot. About this woman here, she Dorothea Puente. Did you ever
see? I recognize that face.
She was, of course.
That's my mother-in-law. Wait a minute. Just a minute. That's my mother-in-law. You got the wrong picture.
Whoops, sorry. My mistake. Like I said, she was killing all these people because of the money. So do you think, like you said, women kill for different reasons than most men serial killers? Is that correct?
Yeah, in and around women kill for money or financial gain. There are exceptions, of course.
Right.
They kill for financial gain. But men serial killers are sexually motivated and want to inflict pain and suffering. Sadosexual killers. Women are not quite like that. They just want to knock the husband off and get his money.
So I know there was a certain period in like the 1960s to like 1980s. It seemed like there was like this mass explosion of serial killers versus other times. Why do you think there was a period that seems to have more than usual serial killers?
Well, it's a bit like gun shooting in America, really. They go in peaks and troughs. I can't really say. I mean, I don't know why it peaked back then.
Yeah, it was a lot.
then it seemed to fade off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it could be a combination of a lot of things. It could be, I think, possibly it's because law enforcement is a little bit more quick to pick them up now.
Yeah, it's true.
Before they actually become a serial killer. I mean, they mucked up with Jeffrey Dahmer big time. And then one of the officers actually got promoted to sergeant or a supervisor. But it's in peaks and troughs. And I suspect as society gets more, we've had COVID, and you've seen the rise in all over the world of domestic violence because of COVID.
True. Yep.
We've seen that. So that's the peaks, and then it comes down again. And now we've got the cost of living crisis in this country, and the crime rate is going up again. So I suspect it's something like that. It's something to do with that, but I can't say for sure.
I was born in '69, so when I was around 7, 8 years old, I do remember this. I don't remember a lot about around that age, but I'm originally from Kansas, and in Wichita, Kansas, they did have a serial killer, the BTK Strangler. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yes.
And then, of course, many years later, he disappears, and then he came out of hiding, and he made a mistake, and he wrote a letter or an email to I think a newspaper or news organization. Yeah. And they traced it back, like you say, they had the capability to do that, to trace it back to a church and then end up leading back to him. Why do you think sometimes serial killers, Jeffrey Dahmer and some other people have done this, they kill, and then there's this long hiatus, then they kill, and then there's a long hiatus. It's like they kill a couple times or maybe 5 or 6 times, and then for 10 years they don't pop back up. Why do you think that fascination or that addiction towards killing people takes them sometimes years to re-emerge?
Well, let's put it this way, that they don't start off just pop into becoming a serial killer
right.
overnight. There's always some history of stalking. I mean, Michael Ross explained it to me. It became like a drug, and it was like an addiction. And the thrill of it is overwhelming. They can't control it. Now, the cooling off period you're referring to, that could be for a number of reasons. It could be with BTK, it was with J.R. Robinson, the internet stalking killer. I mean, they have these breaks. Kenneth Bianchi had some breaks. But eventually, and as it was with Dahmer, these events get closer and closer.
Yeah, right.
It's like having a drug, a drink. You get addicted and you want another hit, and you can't wait to meet another young man and go out and the excitement of the hunt, and then seeing if the kill occurs. Because the stalking phase is most of the time is more exciting for the killer than it is for the actual kill itself. The actual kill itself is where Dahmer scores 10 out of 10, because most killers, once they've killed somebody, they just dump the body like so much trash. But Jeffrey was taking photographs and videos and keeping them in his fridge.
Which is, that's. I mean, why is that something like a trophy? Is it, or is it? I kind of in the series, it felt like he felt like it's just having somebody around, even though it's a dead body or a head is that the case, that for him in particular, it just didn't want to be alone, and just knowing that corpse is there kept him?
Well, we've got a comparison with Jeffrey and a guy called Dennis Nilsen in my country, who killed some young men. He was an ex-cop or something in his little flat in London. He chopped them up and stuffed them down the toilet, blocked the drains, kept them under the floorboards, and stuff like that. But there is a difference between the two, because Dennis Nilsen actually wanted to keep the bodies to talk to and have a chat with in the evening, and wash them and sit on the settee and watch the TV with the dead bodies. I mean, this is grim, isn't it? But Jeffrey didn't. I mean, he let's put it this way, it was masturbatory stuff. He's painting the heads, and he's not really enjoying their company because they're all chopped up into
right.
pieces.
It's not like you can, you can't touch them, or you can, but I mean,
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry I've got to laugh, but that's the British sense of humour. I mean, the guy was a complete nutball.
I mean, that's just to lightly say that. That's you could go way more than that. Well, we've talked about, killing people and throwing them away like trash or even keeping them in your fridge, but Jeffrey did one step further. He did eat some of the flesh. Why? What was the point of that? Why do you think he took that next step?
Well, the history of cannibalism, and I've written a book on this. I've written a book on cannibalism. It goes way back. After Shawcross said he ate flesh, it tasted like pork. Ishikawa, the Japanese guy, he's now out of prison. He's running a restaurant in Tokyo. He ate part of a girl.
Remind me not to go there.
Yeah, Armin Muse, a German guy. He cut up this guy called Brandt, who willingly wanted to be cut up and eaten like an idiot, and he cut him up and he kept all the meat in the freezer and he ate it over a period of months. But with Jeffrey, I look at it like this, and it's this disgusting thought. He was hungry. He didn't have a lot of money to speak of, and he decided to wrap up the meat and put it in his fridge or his freezer. And when he was hungry, he got it out and like Hannibal Lecter, and he thought, I think I'll have some liver today. That would be good. I mean, that's what he did. I mean, can you imagine that? He doesn't go down to the local store and buy a bit of fresh meat. He goes and goes to the freezer and gets somebody's leg.
I grew up, my dad was actually a butcher. Like we, butchered cows and all this stuff. I couldn't even imagine, doing that to a human being. And what baffles me is, Casey, Jeffrey Dahmer, and I'm sure others, I can understand of killing somebody and taking them clear out in the woods and dumping them, but actually burying them under your house, putting it in a crawl space, putting in a barrel. Why do they get so reckless? I mean, like you said, maybe the intelligence wasn't there, but Casey seemed fairly smart to put the evidence right where people could smell it and draw attention to it. I mean, even Dahmer, his neighbors constantly complained about it. It doesn't make sense of why keep. I mean, he laughs because I'm like, makes sense. Does it? Any of it makes sense? But you know what I mean? It's like, why keep it around where it's noticed?
Well, I'll give you one example. This is an Australian example for if you've got anybody listening in Australia. There's a gang of serial killers out there. Now, how big is Australia? It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's got
big.
Massive deserts and everything. You're going to dispose of a body, you go and dig a hole, and then nobody's ever going to find it.
Right.
Yet these idiots put two of the bodies under the front door floor of their kitchen.
That doesn't make sense. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
So I look at it this way. With Gacy, it was his ego.
Right.
No doubt about it. He was ego-driven. He could outsmart the cops, everything. They never thought in a million years they'd look and smell under his floorboards. He was too up himself. He was too up his own backside. Jeffrey was just plumb dumb stupid.
And before we get out of here, we always hear about copycats. People that see somebody go do a mass shooting or somebody, a serial killer. We talked about the fame that a lot of these people get after the fact. They get caught. What do you think makes copycatters do the same thing or try to? Is it more for attention or just to honor their idol?
Well, no, I don't think it's honoring. Well, it is honoring their idol, especially when you talk about mass shootings and incels and stuff like that. I mean, they like to emulate somebody that, or they try to beat them to get themselves into the record books.
Right.
But I think mainly they haven't got an idea how to do it themselves. So they go researching all these crimes and they look at somebody like John Wayne Gacy or somebody like that and say, "Oh, I'll copy his crimes."
Yeah.
See if I can go one better, because they're not that bright. You say Gacy was bright. You say all these killers get caught because they're stupid.
Yeah. Right. Well, they're stupid of just killing anybody in the first place, but I mean, I've had, in fact, in my hometown, one time down at it's a small country town, but they had a bar back in the 70s. Somebody got drunk, ended up shooting somebody with the shotgun. Actually, never caught the person because, again, they didn't have the technology they do now. But, getting drunk and getting mad and then shooting somebody, I get it. It's not right, but I get it. But this, like Jeffrey, you could tell when I went to the bar tonight, I know I'm going to bring somebody home. It was planned. It was, it was pretty much ready to kill somebody else. I mean, that was. Don't you agree? Was the guy from the person who got shot dead in your little town? Was he an attorney? No, unfortunately, we didn't have any attorneys there, so fortunately we didn't. But that's funny.
Did he spiff the client?
Right. Yeah. Beware, attorneys. Beware.
No, I don't think. I think with Jeffrey, many times he didn't intend to go out and kill. He was just socializing. And then all of a sudden somebody just attracted, or he started flirting with somebody, attracted his attention. So I don't think all the time he went out just specifically with the mind to kill somebody, but he saw somebody and then it became out of control. And you get men doing the same thing with women. They go out for a few drinks. Right. Their buddies and everything else, and then one of them says, "Cool, look at that lovely blonde over. I fancy her." And then he wanders off and he starts chatting her up. That's, I think, what happened.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of times he did bring people home. He just did not want them to leave. That's, he did not want to be alone. And I noticed in the series he also watched The Exorcist a lot, Exorcist 3 a lot. Do you think a lot of these people are, because we've heard, Satan worshiper. Well, he seems like he was, but are a lot of these serial killers to that extent, like more Satan? Or
Richard Ramirez won the Night Stalker. They went to this Satanism. But, the thing is, I think that just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
The predilection to kill and commit these offences, and so they feed off this, and then that's all like more fuel to the fire. Watching The Exorcist or something like that.
I'll tell you, Ramirez, when you looked in his eyes, man, I'm sure you've seen a lot of eyes, but that, just looking at pictures, he would make me creeped out if I saw those on the street.
Well, the amazing thing about him, when he was like in court or he's wandering about, and he was quite amicable. He's quite a friendly guy.
Oh, really?
He puts that like Bundy did in one of his photographs, like he's got his arms up in the air and he's running down. But they put on this look for the show.
Oh, that's true. That's true. What sells? I know the creature, the scary man. Yeah, that always sells more. So
what I don't remember, your viewers got to remember, with Jeffrey Dahmer, he was a vampire. He's a walking dead. I mean, I tell a lot of people, he ate people to live.
Wow, that's pretty big statement. Yeah. And do you think, and I know, can serial killers be rehabbed? I mean, do you think, they're going to be in prison the rest of their life once they get caught, but even in prison, do you think they actually can be rehabilitated? Or are they too far gone?
No, you can't erase psychopathy from anybody. You can't get it out of their system.
Yeah.
You can't. It's impossible to remove psychopathy. They can pretend they're reformed. They can go to church on Sundays. They can suck up to the parole board. They can do all that as they want. And sometimes they fool the parole boards and they get out and then they kill again, like Shawcross did. But you cannot get rid of psychopathy. And you can't even treat it in a mental asylum, in a secure hospital with drugs. You can just cool them down, but that need, they've got no conscience. You've got to remember that their brain is not wired up with a conscience like we've got.
Yeah,
they've got where there should be a conscience, they've got a black hole, and you can't fill that in.
And I know the BTK, if I remember right, he was either a deacon in his church, and he was a dog catcher for the city. So
yeah, quite. He was a brutal dog catcher as well.
Yes.
But look at the contradiction there. I mean, all his business about going to church, it's all a cover. It's all fake.
Yeah, for sure. And I've heard he wasn't. He was kind of an odd guy and not the nicest guy either. So, well, man, I could go on all day. But Christopher, I have to say, if anybody wants to check out his books, go to ChristopherBerry-Dee.com. You have, how many books do you have? You have a lot.
Well, that's the thing. It's not my fault that I've got so many. I mean, they're in about 7 or 8 different languages now, even in Japan. I mentioned Ishikawa. I mentioned Ishikawa in one book in a short piece, and all of a sudden it's been published in Japan. It's in Poland, Germany, actually in Russia, believe it or not. France. I did a thing with France the other day. It just goes on and on. And but I only started off to write one book. I didn't anticipate there would be 30, 40 books.
Yeah. When I started looking through it, I was like, okay, there you go. Next page. I was like, how many books have you written? Which is great. I mean, it's more for people like me to enjoy and our viewers. So, and true crime, like I said, it's a huge popular, genre. So, we thank you for putting the time and effort into putting this stuff together. So other than that, do you have anything coming up for people to maybe come see you? You have any book signings or?
I've got a lecture tour starting next year. I'm off to the Philippines in a week's time. I'm going out there for 5 weeks. I'm doing a job out there on a little job. I'm going to help the Cebu City Police try and track down a serial killer, giving them some tips. I've done it before in Manila.
Wow, that's great.
A serial killer, a German expat. We caught him, and that was he killed 2 girls. But I'm going basically to look at the exploding volcanoes and enjoy a first-class typhoon, and possibly with some earthquakes thrown in for good measure.
Hey, you might as well get the full package. That would actually be a great TV mini-series or series of you going and helping police track down a serial killer. You should pitch that idea.
I've done a few cold cases. Michael Ross of 2 homicides, after Shawcross 1 homicide, Kenneth McDuff down in Texas, a few homicides. Only because these killers talk to me and they tell me stuff that they won't talk to the police about, and that's how it comes about, by developing a so-called relationship with these people. That's the only reason. Then I go to the next of kin, and I can tell the next of kin, and it helps to give them some kind of closure. But that's the part of that I enjoy. That's the serious stuff. You can joke all night long about other things, but when you sit down with a woman and her son was murdered 30 years ago and they haven't found his body, and you can help find it, then you do find it, and that means a lot to them.
And I'm glad you said that, because even this series on Netflix is, a lot of the family were very upset that bringing back the memories and the nightmares, and also not even consulting them in making of this. How do you feel about that?
I'm not in a position to judge the TV people, except to say that's awful.
Yeah. You've heard it here first.
Yeah, I think it's courteous to be able to go to see the next of kin and ask them what your intentions are, and ask them if they would like to get involved, because your program is about something serious, not a bloodbath, to exploit and to nail it down in one before we go. The Amityville Horror movie came out, and then there was about 20 sequels, or 10, 15 sequels.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And what they're doing is they're pissing over the graves of 4 little children and their parents, 6 people, and they're in this little grave all together in Long Island. And these movie makers are making movies based on that suffering. And it's the same with Bundyland. Bundy, anything with Bundy on the title is guaranteed to put bums on seats.
Oh, yeah.
That's all it is, and to sell advertising. And I think that at the expense of the next of kin and their suffering. So the least that television production company should have done, if they had any morals whatsoever, and if they thought it was their child that had been butchered,
yeah,
their child, if it was the producer's daughter or son, or the cameraman's daughter or son, at least you would have hoped that somebody had gone to them and said, look, we're doing a responsible program, Netflix, on Jeffrey. Would you like to help us if you can?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually had a cousin that was murdered by her husband, and the neighbor came over and got murdered also in a town just not too far from where I grew up. And I couldn't imagine, her mother and father, they're gone now because this was back in the early 80s. But I couldn't imagine that becoming a TV series and being brought back up for everybody to see.
If my son had been murdered, like in the same situation as that little boy Conorak,
yeah,
and escaped and got taken back, and then years later, year after year after year, there's movies and programs exploiting my little son's death, I would have gone ape.
Oh, I'm sure I would too. But well, everybody go out and pick up this book. You can see it there on screen. And if you're listening to the podcast, it's called Inside the Mind of Jeffrey Dahmer, the Cannibal Killer. And it's Christopher Berry-Dee, D-E-E. And you can go to his website, ChristopherBerry-Dee.com, and you can check out his 4,600 books, his mini books that he has on serial killers. So, but thank you, Christopher. I really appreciate you being on the show, and I can't wait to have you back and talk some more.
Yeah, and one thing for all your viewers all over the world, no nightmares, please.
Yes, only happy thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. You can watch Robert Hensley Mondays at 3 for Minuteman Report, Bonnie Burkert, Minuteman Truth Be Told Transformation. Of course, me every Friday right here on Truth Be Told YouTube page. Please subscribe, leave comments. Until next time, happy Halloween. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows.